Good morning. My name is Akash Kubragade. I am a coordinator at Karunyakara Institute of Dalit Knowledge and PhD scholar at Delhi University, Department of Sociology. Karunyakara Institute of Dalit Knowledge is founded by Professor Dr. Leela Karunyakara sir, and his idea behind the institution is to provide academic space to social scientists, doctors, professors who are engaged in the field of Dalit studies. Today, we have our 22nd of lecture, and this lecture is a part of a series which we started on 2025 on the occasion of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar Jayanti. Professor Dr. Leela Karunyakara sir going to chair the session. So I request Dr. Darshana to please welcome and introduce our chair.
Thank you, Akash. I am Dr. Darshana Mishra, teaching sociology at Yashwant College, Selu, and coordinator of Karunyakara Institute of Dalit Knowledge. I am giving introduction of the chair. Professor Dr. Leela Karunyakara is a founder, vice chancellor, and founder of Karunyakara Institute of Dalit Knowledge. He is author of the History of Dalit Identity and Modernization of Buddhism. After completing his PhD from JNU, New Delhi, Dr. Karunyakara joined as assistant professor in the School of Ambedkar Studies, Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, a center university, Lucknow. He introduced the Dalit history course in the MA history program. He was instrumental in introducing 50% reservation for SC/ST student in the BBAU admissions. He founded Ambedkar University Dalit Students Union in 2000 and Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar Center University SC/ST Teachers Association in 2006. He joined as director cum professor in the Baba Saheb Ambedkar Sidhu Kanu Murmu Dalit and Tribal Studies Center, Mahatma Gandhi Antarashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya. He held post of Dean of School of Culture and former Vice Chancellor of the University. This is the brief introduction of the respected chair. Please welcome sir to this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Darshana, and I welcome our chair, Professor Karunyakara. Now I request Dr. Smita to please introduce our guest.
Yeah, thank you so much, Akash. Actually, it's an honor for me to give an introduction of such an scholar and eminent personality and academician. Professor S. Lourdunathan has completed double MA, MPhil, PhD in philosophy. Professor S. Lourdunathan is a distinguished scholar and academician with over 34 years of teaching and administrative experience. He served as associate professor and head of department of philosophy at Arul Anandar College, Madurai. There he contributed significantly to philosophical formation and research. He has also held several honorary and visiting positions, including honorary professor at the Center for Philosophy, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and visiting professor at seminaries and theological institutes across India, such as Madurai, Nilgiris, Hammam, Wardha, and Goa. Professor Professor Lourdunathan has published 7 books, including Postmodern Times and Religious Discourse, Dalit Liberation Discourse, Philosophical Engagement, Invitation to Logic, and Social Philosophy. His research interest covers phenomenology, ethics, social philosophy, human rights, and philosophy of religion. He has successfully guided several PhD scholars, completed multiple UGC and ICPR sponsored research projects, and organized national and international seminars. His academic engagements have taken him to Germany, South Korea, Cambodia, and Malaysia, where he delivered lectures and keynote addresses on philosophy, justice, and ethics. Currently, he is preparing course material on philosophical theology and guiding a PhD scholar from Serampur Theological Seminar, Kolkata. So, being a coordinator, I heartily welcome, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Smita. I also welcome Professor Lourdunathan sir. And today, Professor Lourdunathan sir going to speak on Dalit philosophical discourse. So I request Professor Lourdunathan sir, so please deliver his lecture. Thank you.
Are the slides visible over there?
Yes, sir, the slide is visible and your voice is also clear.
Okay. I must thank Professor Leela Karunyakara and other officials of this search for Dalit knowledge that you have been engaged for the past several years. I understand this is the 22nd lecture, and I thank you for this because I have been working on Dalit issues quite long time, basically from a philosophical perspective. So in other words, my area of work or writing is Dalit hermeneutics in terms of liberative potentials, mainly from a philosophical background. That is my area of interest where I've been working, where I continue to engage these issues. Now, to cut down my timing, I've titled my sharing with you. It's not exactly a lecture. Dalit philosophical discourse. I think the word Dalit is quite known to us and unknown to many. And I'm coining this word philosophical discourse in the sense that from a philosophical background, how do I look at the whole discourse on Dalit concerns? Discourse basically is not exactly a conversation. Discourse is not basically a kind of a dialogue between cultures, but more than that, it is a kind of critical dialogue establishing a space within the geopolitics which is antithetical to any discourse against Dalits with reference to the other, the exploit the other, the marginalized the other, the despised the other. So I have titled the subtitle, I have put it this way: rethinking about thinking. I'm conscious I'm addressing many of you are political scientists. Professor, the chairperson, is an historian and sociologist, probably certain anthropologists there, and probably some of my friends who have done philosophy would also join with you. But let us first of all ask this question: what is this philosophy? I understand it in two senses. One is it is a study, an inquiry into the fundamental issues regarding existence. Is different from existentiality. Existence, we refer to existence as wholeness, as completeness, the foundational sense of understanding, the sense of being. Knowledge, normally we use the word epistemology, values, morality or ethics, with the seeking mind in terms of a critical analysis. But then I understand Dalit philosophical discourse in a different sense as well. Not only a critical inquiry into the metaphysical, epistemological, ethical dimensions, but much more than Dalit philosophical discourse originates from, nativates from the non-philosophical. What exactly I mean by the non-philosophical? Predominantly, the philosophical world discusses philosophy within the philosophical space, within the philosophical boundaries. I think there must be an original question: how exactly philosophy originated, the whole discussion? I put it this way. For example, Greek philosophy has originated in the non-philosophical world, that is in the political world, that is in the social world. In the world of deprivation, I think Greek philosophy came out with this tremendous speculations on the question of, I'm referring to Heraclitus, a Greek ancient philosopher, who talks about fire as the basic substratum of the universe. Now, fire is a word that symbolizes. It is an image, a war between the dominant culture of the Greek dominant politics against the non-Greek Athenian, the subaltern cultures over there. So there has been a war always between the dominant classical Greek and the so-called non-classical or outside the Greek. So my contention, first contention is philosophy is philosophical, not because it discusses philosophy. Of course, it is very important, and it is important taking into the account its historical development, but its origination, its response is from the non-philosophical world, the political world. In that sense, I use the word the Dalit philosophical discourse. So Dalit philosophical discourse, let me put it very sharply, is a discourse on two levels. One is at the non-philosophical level, especially the social, the political, the economic, put it in my own language, the existential world, and the philosophical world with which the Dalit discourse is trying to engage is the realm of philosophy, the ideational world where the Dalit is to reconcile with, reconstruct it, or deconstruct his position. That's why I put it in my word, rethinking about thinking. So in this particular lecture, I have a fundamental question. To what extent the entire philosophical domain, both Western as well as Indian, positions, constructs, or misconstructs, or non-constructive of deprived existence. When I say deprived existence, despised existence, marginalized existence, I mean the racially deprived, the patriarchally deprived in our culture, within the Indian historical, social, political scenario, the Dalit deprivation. In other words, I put it this way, the Dalit existence as a metaphysical reality, existentiality as a physical reality are both the ground where the question of Dalit discourse is to be engaged. I think that is where scholars are engaging around the country and apart from the country. The Dalit existence, I understand, is a sense of being with. It is not a sense of being away. It is not the sense of being excluded. It is a sense of being with the other being. That is the foundational ontological sense of Dalit existence. But when it comes to its existentiality, the social, the physical, the political level, this existentiality becomes what we call a deprived existence in the history of Indian cultural, social, political structures. So my basic question, this way I put it, in what sense, let me focus on purely on Indian philosophy for some time. Now, this is an area I think not much touched. It remains an untouchable realm within the academic field. When it comes to what I call philosophical world, there is a long discussion on what is metaphysics, what is epistemology, what is morality. Having that background, let me try to do as a person who is seriously engaged within the Dalit philosophical discourse. Now, let me put the whole Indian philosophy into three important narratives, which I call dominant narratives. There is a narrative of, let's say, analogical narrative, a snake and a rope. And that is a narrative that subsumes the entire Advaitin, Vedantic, Vedic position. The snake and the rope. In other words, it talks about the illusory status of the empirical world. Prospectively, we are disillusioned. In that world, the real world, the reality of the real world is missed. And how it is missed because of our wrong perception. I think that is vulgarized with this famous example of snake and the rope. Ultimately, Advaitic school of thought within the Indian tradition tried to establish us a sense of self-consciousness by negating the other consciousness. That is the point of what we call this debate or a contest, which I would like to place for a discussion within the Dalit philosophical discourse. The entire Vedantic position, especially they call it Orthodox Indian philosophical position. The Orthodox Indian philosophical position is distinguished in terms of its agreement with the Vedic supremacy, in terms of its agreement with the Vedic claims of validity of knowledge. And there is another school of thought which is also in some way categorized, those schools of thought which are not in agreement with Vedic knowledge supremacy, validity of scripture, Vedic knowledge, they are called heterodox. The Dalit discourse would begin somewhere. Is this distinction legitimate? Is this distinction legitimate? To agree with a particular scripture, you call it orthodox. To disagree with the particular scripture, we call it heterodox. In other words, not belonging to the official doctrine of Indian philosophical tradition. And how about Dalit scripture, Dalit oral narratives, Dalit life world? So we'll start with that. In other words, put it in a very substantial way, the Advaitin position, by elucidating the analogy, the narrative of seeing the snake, the rope is lost, seeing the rope, the snake is lost, dwells upon a particular issue of non-duality. That existence is ultimately non-dual. They are not telling singular. Anything that is dual is to be what we call vulgarized, separated, negated. So methodologically speaking, epistemologically speaking, it's a method of negation of the empirical in order to affirm the phenomenal world. In other words, they stipulate, speculate the pure sense of liberation. They call it Videha Mukti, pure sense of pure consciousness as a kind of non-touchable by the empirical world. What I mean by non-touchable, the non-touchable of the empirical, the non-touchable of the despised community. In other words, within the dominant Indian tradition, the Dalit existence remains either subdued, silenced, non-attended, non-existence. So in that way, I have an argument which we'll take care for a discussion when we have it. The second predominant school of thought, I am taking an instantiation. A Sankhya school is again belonging to Orthodox Indian philosophical tradition. I will explain Sankhya with again their own narrative. They have a narrative of a blind man and a lame man. A lame man sitting on the blind man's shoulder, and they are walking ahead towards a path of self-realization. Now, the Advaitin is critique of the Sankhya, telling that the blind refers to what we call the Prakriti, the lame man refers to Purusha. By their interaction, by their mutuality, two separate substances come together, and by coming together, they walk towards the sense of liberation. But ultimately, they will come again they use a particular contested geopolitical position that liberation is possible by getting out of this chain of reincarnation, causal chain of subject as the knower and object as the known is what we call nullified, mitigated. Ultimately, Purusha realizes its real nature, that it is self-consciousness. Now, very interestingly, there is what we call inherent criticism of Advaitin, who holds a non-dualistic position, whereas it criticizes the Sankhya position as dualistic, and the metaphor they use it, both it is in some way limited. Blindness is a limitation, lameness is a limitation, understanding the existence is again a limitation by a mode of causation. The third important narrative, I'm taking only the major narratives, which I take a Jainist school of thought. Jainism, many of you should know it. It's kept along with Buddhist thought of thought, where Ambedkar interprets Buddhism in terms of Neo-Buddhism, in terms of what we call Buddha and Dhamma, which is nothing but a pragmatic interpretation of the scriptural foundations of Buddhism. Now, within Jainist school of thought, there is a bigger analogy. I think this is a very popular analogy. 6 blind men touching the elephant. The elephant is the reality. The blind man is the perceiver, the knower, the researcher, the scholar. They are by touching the reality, by perceiving the reality, they understand, they describe it in different way. In other words, put it epistemologically, knowledge, there is a distinction between the knower and the known. The elephant is the reality. Elephant can also signify the Dalit reality. By touching or by not even touching, they are already not visible. They are blind. By sense of touch, a sense of perception, they claim differently about what it is called the reality. again, the word six blind man is something very interesting for me within my Dalit discourse. Six, Jainism is an heterodox school. By being heterodox, it is not in agreement with the six systems of Orthodox school. And then there is an internal critique of Jainist thought that the six, numeral six, analogically, symbolically, refers to those six dominant Orthodox systems which are in some way limited in their epistemological perception, limited in their theory of reality, limited in their claim for morality. So I think there is a lot of background probably when we discuss. Now again, the problem within this Jaina school of thought is that six blind men representing six schools of thought by way of understanding reality. Six schools of thought we have Vedanta, Shankya, Nyaya Vaisheshika, and these schools of thought, all orthodox schools of thought, which is in a way silent on the idea of existence of the non-existence, which they consider as Dalit existence, which is not visible, which is not verbal. The invisibility of Dalit, this is the point of my argument. The invisibility of the Dalit, naturally the reality of Dalit existence is somehow not even misconstructed, not even, it is in some way what I call not constructed reality. So there is a systematic and inbuilt legitimate way of keeping the existence, the reality, the question of the reality of the other, the despised the other, within the castefold world remains highly subtle, highly diplomatic, highly political. This is what I call the politics of knowledge within Indian cultural philosophical tradition. Now the third element which I would like to discuss is that all these schools of thought, cultural, philosophical schools of thought, which I call the dominant schools of thought, which the so-called non-Dalit world participate in this world of thought, in this cognitive world of thought, I think they legitimize their position not by showing the reality. A political scientist, a social scientist, an historical researcher would study the reality, would study the reality of the social, the economical, the political, and then represent the reality through certain scientific manner. But fortunately or unfortunately, mark my words, understanding, knowledge is claimed within Indian cultural tradition, within Indian philosophical tradition, not by a scientific representation, not by experimentation, not by showing the world, but by repetitive, repressive, epistemic legitimization. I think I'll have to come back to what I mean by repetitive, regressive, epistemic legitimization. Epistemic means what is called true knowledge is legitimized by a method of considering what is true knowledge. That is called legitimization. Now, knowledge, the caste knowledge, in somehow soaked within this broader frame. I'm only taking three major instances given to my short of time, and I want more discussion because not many people engage this. I know some of my friends engage this. Their way of engaging this Dalit philosophical discourse is a bit significantly different from the way I try to engage. And that's why I thank you for this listening, participating community that Professor have given to me. So what I mean by repetitive, regressive epistemic, I put it this way. I make it is by manana. First it starts by listening, then it starts by repetition, manana, and third by reproducing what is called Vedic knowledge truth. So what I call, whereas in West, and especially in modern philosophy that Ambedkar engaged, I think his epistemology is different. He was not interested in this area of repetitive listening, reproductive culture of the old into the new. Caste is reproduced by manana. Caste is reproduced by performances. Caste is reproduced by what we call some scriptural legitimization. Caste is reproduced by religion. Caste is reproduced by festivals, whatever festivals, by food practices, by politics of power relations. In other words, Indian culture, Indian philosophy establishes a particular politics of knowledge by a mode of repetition, not by a mode of collective representation, not by a mode of scientific testability. And that is how I think politically this is also true, that walking back to the world is the best way of going back to the old claims, what you call caste claims, established through Ramayana, Bhagavad Gita, Vedic literature. I think there is some kind of holiness is etc. attributed, by which another category of people are remain continuously reproduced at various levels. I call it web of relations, web of oppressive relations. So in other words, the question of Dalit, my comeback to this, is non-constructive, rather silently constructed as the despised other. So these are some of the dominant examples with which I would like to look at the whole. So Dalit philosophical discourse, again, what I mean by Dalit philosophical discourse, number one, it tries to rethink the metaphysical categories by which the Dalitness or the non-existence of Dalit is already cognitively constructed as an a priori condition to understand the reality. So in other words, both existence, the philosophical sense of the term existence, being, and existentiality, the social sense of the Dalitness as deprived other, as the despised other. Both existence and existentiality refers to what I call a metaphysics of non-presence is cognitively constituted within the philosophical dimension. This is one important inference I would like to place before you for your consideration and discussion. So there is a metaphysics not of a presence. Derrida speaks about metaphysics of presence in Western philosophy, how the word logo, how the idea becomes ideational and social, starting from the scholastic thought to modern thought, how the logo is central, and the non-logo, the emotion, the physical, the feminine becomes the bodily to be despised with. But I would like to use another way. There is a metaphysics of non-presence. Metaphysics is not seeable reality, but it's a cognitive reality. And the non-presence of Dalit is cognized as an a priori condition to view the reality, which is culturally placed as caste subjugation at different layers, as a movement, a dialectical movement of a web of oppressive relations. So which I call a metaphysics of dominant presence. Probably Derrida would use that word. Existentially speaking, it's a culture of subjugation, and which is both historical and social. In other words, there are two dimensions. Let me again cognize this way. Dalit philosophical discourse operates at two levels. One at the philosophical level, another level at the non-philosophical level, both in a relational way. The non-philosophy is linked with the philosophical world. The philosophical world ought to be linked with the non-philosophical world. Unfortunately, predominantly, philosophy remains ideational, self-excluding. The discussion that is taking place, I've been part of philosophical world for the past many years. The discussion that is taking place in philosophical world, there is not in a single world called the existence of the other. Not even a single discussion on the existence of the deprived other. The existentiality of the social other. In our frame of mind, the existence of the social other is nothing but the Dalit existence. One basic issue, I think, when Ambedkar reads the entire annihilation of caste, he comes out with one particular finding. Caste, I'm bracketing my sociological terminology. Caste, there is a construction of a self within the system of caste. That self is a self-enclosed self. And that is why most orthodox Indian philosophy talks about liberation. The notion of liberation is Dalit discourse will contest it, will try to relook it, rethink it. I'll come back to the last part of my sharing with you. Ambedkar reading, I think summarizedly I'll put annihilation of caste as caste as culture, as philosophical background, constructs a self, categorizes a self, ontologically precondition a sense of a self as a self-enclosed self. The more you self-enclose it through yoga, right? For example, the more you self-enclose it, that means the more you don't relate with other selves, the more you don't relate with the other self by a method of negating the empirical world or subjugating the material Prakriti world. And it is called self-realization. The terminology they use it, liberation. Now, this is a very confusing terminology. Blacks use the word liberation, feminists use the word liberation, we Dalits use the word liberation. What is the sense of liberation in Indian philosophy is again a problematized word. So Dalit philosophical discourse takes second important contest, a debate, a rethinking, a thinking. What is the sense of liberation that we talk about when Indian philosophy is constructively communicated to the generations? And there is an epistemological linkage of Dalit philosophical discourse. I put it in a very, very sharp way. Probably if we have a longer discussion, we can even go for epistemological discussion. Now, the existing epistemology, I put in one word, it is an epistemology of regression. True knowledge is attained not by a representation of truth, but it is attained by regression into a kind of monopolizing what is called truth. It's a kind of a coherency theory of truth. If you agree with, then it is called truth. You agree with the supremacy of Vedas, then it is true. You agree with Nyaic inference, then it is true knowledge. And if you disagree, then you are a Charvaka, you are a Buddhist, you are a Jainist, you are an Ambedkarite. Is it clear? So it is a kind of a demand, categorical speaking, must try to let itself a critique potential of this epistemology of regression. When Dalit philosophical discourse opens up the possibility of a new epistemology, an openness towards epistemology by breaking the boundary of the traditional epistemology, by letting it open. Not exactly we say we are criticizing it, by analyzing it. Dalit philosophical discourse is basically analytical in that nature. Analyzing the cogito that has been established, analyzing the culture that has been established, analyzing the non-personhood, the non-selfhood that is cognitively constructed within the systems of knowledge. I think that's where Dalit philosophy discourse navigates itself. It begins with the non-philosophical world, the Dalit world, but navigates into the philosophical world, how the philosophical world remains untouchable and treat as a particular existentiality as not necessarily as inferior, as subjugated other for power relations. So one sense of epistemology, when we have discussion, I will go for it. Another sense of epistemology, which I call epistemology of representation, which is basically scientism. Most of us, social scientists, political scientists, historians, use this particular methodology in their research. Science as testable, scientific truth as verifiable, and then you agree upon something as true knowledge only when it is publicly verifiable. That particular area. Which also there is a critique. I think the Shankya has that subject as the knower, the Dalit as the object is not even the knower, he's outside the knowing world. Outside the knowing world. It is not knowing the world. In other words, there are two layers. The Dalit is deprived of not knowing, not being epistemological, and the Dalit is cognized in such a way it falls outside the whole philosophical terrain. In that way, I call it is an epistemology of repression. Put it in a very normal language, there is a politics of violence within the structures of knowledge. When I come to discussion, I will come back to this. Third important area, what I call the moral area. I make a distinction with reference to Dalit philosophical discourse. We need to make a very strong distinction between what do you call morality and what we call ethics. the entire predominant philosophical tradition speaks about morality. They call about Purusha, Dharma. A person has to follow in life Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Many of my own teachers in philosophy taught me this Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, either in their combination or in their separation or in their numerical differentiation. And the whole discussion revolves around this like a chessboard. Two players are playing, one always wins. Purushartha is the Dharma Sutra, which comes out with, but then within Purushartha, there is a very strong legitimization of caste system. What I mean by legitimization of caste system, Purushartha is Varna Ashrama Dharma. When it comes into practice, that means Ashrama Dharma is Varna Dharma. Varna Dharma is nothing but caste Dharma. It is a morality, not ethics. Ethics is a sense of being with other. Morality is a sense of how I should not be with the other. How I should not be with the other. Caste morality, if I use the word morality, probably some of you may call it immoral, but student of philosophy, I'm using it a little more cautiously. Caste morality is not the sense of promoting being with other in relation, but how not being with the other in terms of unrelation, in sense of separation. The whole Varna Ashrama Dharma discussion, we'll take it for a discussion. So, Indian philosophical tradition, by metaphysics, by epistemology, by their morality, remains silent, steadied silence. Let me put it this way, constructed silence, cognitively constructed silence with reference to the existence and the existentiality of the sense of being with. So within this background, what I mean by Dalit philosophical inquiry. What I mean by Dalit philosophical inquiry. The first I said, three dominant positions through narratives, repeating the narratives through cultural performances. They use the words Ravana, Manana, etc., etc. For the want of time, I'm not going into that. So the being of the Dalit is not an exteriority of the being. And most of us, I think many even Dalits understand the Dalit space as an exterior being. But I would put this way, Dalit, being of the Dalit, say I being a Dalit, I am not an exterior being, rather an exterior being against any other being in the world. I am not a being against, antithetical to any other being. I am against the definition of the non-being, which is constituted. I am against the definition. Even in Western philosophy, we have this predominant discourse. Parmenides, for example, he positioned being only in relation, and the relation is antithetical relation. Aristotelian categorical oppositional. Against the non-being, being establishes its supremacy. Let me go back to Western philosophical tradition. Modern philosophy, again, the knower becomes knower by self-consciousness as against the object that is known. The duality is there. So I think that is what we call the phenomenology, the later tradition, the late modern tradition, the post-colonial tradition tried to position subjectivity as the epistemic point of departure from the claims of objectivity. From the claims of objective. And when time comes, we shall discuss this. So the sense of being of Dalit is not an exteriority of being, as an exterior being, as a sense of being a Dalit. Not necessarily I want to be an outsider. I want to be an outsider of the caste system. Being outside the sense of being with others by its existence. Rather, it is in being in existentiality. It is constructed, cognitively constructed, connotatively put into. Connotation means idea. Meaning is derived from idea. Right? That is called connotation. Being in existentiality. Within the traditional caste colonial continuity. I use the word continuity. We can take it for discussion. The Dalit existence is a being with and is a being towards. There are two senses of being. It is a being with and it's a sense of being towards. So it is affirmative in that sense. It is foundationally the sense of a being Dalit, not in the sense of a separation. It responds to, it challenges it. It is antithetical to any separate web of oppressive relations. It is when it constitutes hostile by the mental archaeological structures of Indian caste cultural coloniality. Therefore, the interiorization of the self within the caste world, within the so-called legitimized philosophical world of the Indian dominant tradition pervade a metaphysics of exclusion, which is not visible in philosophy. Which is not visible. That's why I use the word, it is a metaphysics of exclusion of the Dalit existence. And by exclusion of this, by playing this politics of metaphysics of exclusion or metaphysics of non-existence of the Dalit within the philosophical world, I think Indian philosophy, maybe I'm using a little strong, is incapable to realize the sense of intersubjectivity. I'm sorry to use a word. I feel very strongly, you must criticize me, that it becomes incapable, incapacitated, because there is no self-criticism. There is a person by name Habermas, you must be knowing. He says, philosophy remains true, not by repeating, not by reproduction, by way of renouncing it, by way of renouncing. Every epoch, Foucault refers to epoch and epistemology. Epistemology is linked with a particular period, and every period has established a particular epistemology. Modern philosophy establishes an epistemology of scientific representation, testability of truth, and there is an idea of falsifiability also included. Scholastics, early dominant Greek philosophy established coherency of thought, where they were talking about. Now this metaphysics, that's why I said, putting these Western as well as Indian philosophy together, I sense it is incapable of addressing, realizing intersubjectivity, which the Dalit sense of being tries to move towards, try to respond towards. Because of this insensitivity, incapability, how to call it? It is visually challenged, perceptually challenged. It intended performative subject knowledge as it becomes enclosed. That is basic reason Ambedkar comes out with that single word. It is a self-enclosed self. One cannot talk about relationality. In this given, I call it a totalitarian of the worldview, a philosophical totalitarianism that has been systematically transmitted from generation to generation until now. Take, for example, classical Indian philosophy or ancient Indian philosophy. There is no modern Indian philosophy. We call it contemporary Indian philosophy. All of them are just a reproduction of the old in a better language. And in other way, there is no, in some way, the regression of truth, repression of the truth, monopolization of truth is happening over there. But there is a very good discussion in terms of mutual criticism. For example, the Sankhya, Advaitin would criticize Sankhya, and heterodox system like Jaina would criticize the orthodox system. There are mutual criticism. I would put it this way, it is playing a football game with an established rules. But the Dalit world demands a different type of game. A game which includes every other subjectivity as a form of intersubjective relational possibility. That is the cultural Dalit world. So in other words, it's a critique, Dalit philosophical discourse, first of all. It's a critique of the totalitarian pro-caste world of the philosophical tradition. In that words, it's a critique potential. In other words, it is in-depth rethinking. It is not just making a statement I disagree with. It's not making a political claim. Much more seriously, substantially, in the substratum level. Marx will talk about the depth structure. I'm not talking about economic. I'm talking about the cognitive structure. I'm talking the structure that structures the social structure. Structuralism, I'm referring to structuralism. How word derives their meaning by cognitively structured in terms of antinomies, in terms of oppositional, as high and low, as pure or impure, as touchable as untouchable, as spirit and body, as angel and devil, as God and the thing. And within this relation, there is always an antithetical relation, but the interesting thing, they need each other. The non-Dalit world, in order to be non-Dalit, needs the Dalit world. And the Dalit world, in order to assert within the caste world, needs the Dalit world. There is a kind of illegal linkage between the two categories. But the substantial Dalit discussion, especially after Ambedkar, inspired by Buddhist reading, interpretative hermeneutical reading of Buddhism, I think opens up different possibilities of reading. I'm sure as historian, as sociologist, as political sciences, as economist, you are engaging with the Dalit question from your discipline. Now, in that sense, the Dalit philosophical inquiry or Dalit discourse has two dimensions. It is transdisciplinary. It is not only disciplinary, that from a particular point of view, it is transdisciplinary, it is interdisciplinary. Philosophically, I put it, it is rethinking of the thinking. I put it this way. It is simultaneously kind of a synchronized. I'm not talking about an utopia. It's a sense of synchronizing critique potential with the potential politics of liberation of Dalit existentiality. So let me move on to, this is what I call Dalit philosophical discourse hermeneutics. I'm using the word hermeneutics in a particular sensibility. There are two important sensibilities, the cognitive and the contextual dimension, where the Dalit discourse is happening for the past several years. And that hermeneutics is at the level of thinking and rethinking, which I call philosophical critique against instrumentality of the epistemology, dominant epistemology. Simultaneously, it tries to reconstruct liberative potential, cognitively criticizing what is misconstructed in cognitive platform. In other words, it is against the politics of knowledge. And this is where I believe a lot of work must be undertaken by our generation, and especially generation of youngsters. And I'm not telling education like Ambedkar is talking about. Education. Heraclitus talks about change. War is the beginning of wisdom. It is not, repetition is the beginning of wisdom. War simply means tension between the dominant Greek and to be dominated by the Greek world. That's why he talks about fire is the basic sense of energy. Now, interestingly, Ambedkar talks about authenticity of a culture. He gives a particular epistemic criterion. You know what it is? It must be marked by a revolution. Read the book called, what is it? Essays on Hinduism. Essays on Hinduism. Am I correct? A philosophy of Hinduism, where he comes out with a beautiful epistemological theory. One theory he denies epistemology is that how do you legitimize a scripture is legitimate without giving the ground of its legitimization? How do you legitimize the claims of a scripture is valid without foregrounding the measuring claims how it is valid? So in other words, there is a sense of cognitive serious concern. It is a notion of a new politics of knowledge. And this politics of knowledge is not simply a matter of reconciliation, as religious people try to promote that idea. It's a matter of responding towards. It's a discourse, learning from the concomitant communities around the world, which are in some important sense that despise the other, the face of the other in Levinas language. It is to go beyond the constituted epistemic boundary. So there are triple ways. It is a critique. It is to reconstruct. By way of reconstructing, it questions the very idea of liberation itself. In Indian philosophy, we have the notion of liberation. We call it mukti. Does mukti addresses the word Dalit? It is self-enclosed self, realizing itself by negating the other. So, and contextually, cultural, which you are good at it. So put it this way, I'll put it this way, rethink the thought categories. There is a phenomenology of consciousness the Dalit existence takes into account. I'm not talking about existentiality. I think as a sociologist, political scientist, historian, you would be better to inform me. I'm talking about the existence, metaphysical reality, epistemological position. So metaphysically, there is non-existence is cognitively constituted, number one. I make this inference. Epistemological sense of not thrownness, not simply facticity to be accounted. A political scientist would do it. Economists will do it. You are accounting facticity. But there is another layer. There is a sense of thrown awayness. Thrownness, that you are thrown in the world. You can count the world. You can experiment in the world. Thrown awareness is covered. Is in a way, how to say that? Is politicized. Is politicized. Even the current political affairs. So there is a phenomenology of consciousness. Dalit philosophical discourse hermeneutics must take into account. It is conscious of the other. It is conscious of the cognitive categories by which it is ontologically preconditioned as non-existence. And it is third level of consciousness. It is self-conscious, that its consciousness is a relegated consciousness. And that is where what I call the real Dalit philosophical discourse navigates. So it is a consciousness, a self-consciousness of its non-subjectivity, as well as it is consciousness of its being with the other, of its intersubjectivity towards the other by a mode of relational possibility. I always give this example. The existence of mother is counted only by the existence of the mother, of the child. In absence of the child, a person cannot be called a mother. In the absence of a mother, a person cannot be called a child. In other words, the word child takes its cognition in relation to, not in opposition, but in the caste world, the Brahmin, the Dalit, the non-Dalit, the non-Brahmin, they gain their meaning in opposition. There is a kind of illegitimate relation by a mode of oppositional relation. So we need to problematize these cognitive categories, these a priori categories that has conditioned the cultural reality of the Dalit world. I would say it is to promote a sense of intersubjectivity. It is to promote a sense of intersubjectivity. I think by promoting intersubjectivity is addressed by hermeneutically engaging within the world of the Dalit, by becoming, even by shedding away its Dalitness at one particular point of departure. Politically, yes, identity of the Dalit is important, but I have a different question. Identity is different from identifications. When philosophical categories, when social categories identified the Dalit as identification of Avarna, outcast, Dalit, excluded other, that is identification. But identity notion is different. Identity is a notion of selfhood, not only selfhood, plurality of selfhood, communitarianity of selfhood, collectivity of selfhood. So that is called identity. Identity politics, yes, identification. But which identification is a correct identification? It's a problematics. Therefore, problematization is very important of the way the Dalit world has been categorized. I would like to request you. Right now I refrain from my discussion. I'd come back to you after some questions. Can I refrain right now, Professor?
Yeah, no. You may continue. Then we'll have a questions at the end.
Okay. 1 minute. I'll get back to you. The last conclusion is this: when the epistemology of Advaita negates the empirical world, when the epistemology, for example, Sankhya deprives the material world, is it clear? There is a negation, there is a deprivation. When even the heterodox system like what do you call, the example I gave, Jaina, talks about relative perception, relativity of perception, and many are voters of relativism today, especially the postmodern world, are voters of relativity as the ground for truth, as a ground of understanding. I think the Dalit takes a different. It is not simply relativism. Anything can go ism, maybe ism. And it has to take a substantial epistemic position. It has to take a substantial epistemic standpoint. What is a substantial epistemic standpoint? By way of discontenting with the established categories now. How do you get discontent with? By involving philosophically, cognitively. Of course, many of us are involved There are very serious socially committed persons. But there is a cognitive involvement is something that we need to promote within the intellectual, let's say, space of our country. But this will somehow be what we call politicized. We need to be very careful. I'll tell you the last conclusion only as a way of suggestion. The epistemic engagement, not encroachment. We are not encroaching in the space of the other, in the time of the other. The epistemic engagement of the Dalit operates on a particular principle. I call it the principle of not negation, not subjugation, not subordination, not even representation. I call it a principle of double negation. What I mean by double negation, epistemic principle of double negation. You negate all the negations. The negation that has been established physically, existentially, we call discrimination, we call it oppression, we call it domination, we call it multiple forms of power relation. So there is a negation which has been inherited, invested on the body of the Dalit world, and treated it not even as a body, as a despised body. So double negation. And another type of negation, the negation of the Dalit silenced within the cognitive world of philosophical tradition. These negation must be double negated in order, the simple mathematics, double negation is equal to affirmation. The Dalit life world affirms a phenomenology of consciousness and a phenomenology of liberation, and it is a continuity of a discourse. Not in the sense of negating, not in the sense of criticizing, but in the sense of evolving a critique potential for a praxis possibility. Probably the Ambedkarian language is annihilation of caste. Nihilate the annihilation. And that is called double negation. So that is a prophetic insight that we gain from reading Ambedkar. So I put it this way, that Dalit philosophical discourse is in relation with metaphysical, epistemological, moral, ethical, by way of critique potential, by questioning the a priori conditions. What I mean by a priori conditions, this is the way one you have to look at the world. The Advaitic way of looking at the world, the Vedic way of looking at the world, the Gita way of looking at the world, the historical golden caste way of looking at the world. These are all a priori categories by which our subjectivity is conditioned. So liberation is not enchantment with this, but dechainment. The chain has to be broken cognitively. So it is a simultaneous process. It's a simultaneous. The academician, the so-called, what I call, how to put it, the Marxian, is it clear? The Ambedkarian, the deprived, the black intellectual, for example, there are pointers. They are very, very good pointers. So it is both an academic as well as social world. It is both a physical engagement as well as a non-physical cognitive engagement by a mode of double negation. Double negation is not negating the other self. It is including the other in order to affirm the best possibility, authentic possibility of an intersubjective world. And that is where I think the whole Dalit discourse is been happening in our country, carried out by many of you, for example, and classically what you are doing, what you have done in history. That's how I look at the whole Dalit philosophical discourse. So thank you very much for a wonderful coming together.
Thank you, sir. It is a very good and enriching lecture for all of us. Now I request Professor Dr. Leela Karunyakara sir to please give his remark on today's lecture.
Yeah, Professor Lourdunathan is a very well-known public personality as well as highly reputed eminent academic. Is a thinker as well as well-renowned scholar of philosophy. I come to know about him when he was delivering a lecture on Dalit theology in Chennai seminary. I think it's a seminary. So it was. I was told about him by very known people from the Chennai. Then I thought that I could approach him for delivering a lecture on same Dalit theology on this KIDK platform. But however, he preferred to give a lecture on Dalit philosophical discourse.
Yes.
So the idea, the idea which immediately attracted me, and I really put a great trust on him of delivering such a wonderful lecture. Really, Professor Lourdunathan, you have really gave us a new paradigms. Actually, you opened a new paradigm to most of us here. And there are, I could see many young scholars, academics, doctorates who are doing research for doctorate and who are got awarded as a doctorate. Young scholars, many of them with us today, and many academicians also there with us across the country, and some of the young assistant professors also I could see. So I hope that this lecture not only given a new perspectives, it's also might be making us to work to look at the things entirely a new way. It's a meaningful and purposeful. Certainly, it's valued our time. Thank you very much, Professor Lourdunathan.
Thank you.
We are really benefited out of your lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your insights, for the company. And
Thank you, sir. Now, the forum is open for question answers. Those who want to ask a question, please wait.
Yes, sir.
Amit, let me complete first. So, those who want to ask a question, please go ahead and please stick to the lecture only. Please don't ask anything apart other from the lecture. Thank you. So, Amit, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Wonderful lecture. Sir, two questions in my mind. My first question, how are the...
You have to introduce yourself first. Introduce yourself.
Yes.
Yes, sir. So I am a student of Mahatma Gandhi Antarashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya, master's student in Hindi literature in Bardha. Sir, your lecture is wonderful and knowledgeable.
Why you say it's wonderful? Tell me. Okay. Yes, Amit. Go on.
Sir, my two questions in Dalit philosophical discourse in lecture today. My first question.
Yes, Amit.
Sir, my first question, how are the epistemology, metaphysics and axiology of the Dalit philosophy different from the epistemology, metaphysics and axiology of the Brahminical philosophy? And sir, my second question, philosophers like Charvaka, Buddha, Ravidas, Kabir, Jyotiba Phule and Savitribai Phule, Periyar, Dr. Ambedkar, emerged a great Dalit thinkers. However, despite their revolutionary ideas, why did the social structure and social institution not indulged fundamental and radical transformation? Their thought aimed at the welfare of both the so-called upper and the oppressed lower caste, yet true social change did not occur. Thank you, sir.
So there is a problem, I think, with...
Yes, sir.
So let me carry on till he joins.
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah. So this is the Dalit philosophical discourse. It's a topic, it's a very new way of putting the things. How Dalit philosophical discourse. So we are acquainted with many philosophical streams in India. we are told about Vedantic philosophy. Yeah, I am following you. Just right. Yes, Professor. Hello.
There was a heavy power cut here.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Am I okay? Yeah, please, we shall continue. I'm really sorry for what has happened.
Not a problem, sir. Thank you for rejoining.
Yes.
Now, Amit Kumar, please repeat your question. Amit?
Professor Amit, you wanted to ask how something?
Yeah.
We go ahead with all the questions
Yes.
so that you could answer. Yeah.
Okay.
Next you take up another question.
Yes.
So, Amit?
Amit questions are
Yes, sir.
let you go ahead.
No, sir, but before Amit questions and the sir was left. So his question is not completed. Amit?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please ask your questions again. हेलो अमित
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
फिर से पूछिए अपने क्वेश्चंस फिर से पूछिए
No, you go he noted, sir has noted, you go ahead with the other one.
Amit, put your question sharp. 1, 2. And somebody
Yes,
else? Yes.
Sir, my first question is there are the epistemology, metaphysics, and axiology of the Dalit philosophy different from the epistemology, metaphysics, and axiology of the Brahmanical philosophy. And sir, my second question is philosophers like Charvaka, Buddha, right? Emerged as greatest thinkers, in thinkers. How, despite their revolutionary ideas, why did the social structure and social institution not undergo fundamental and radical transformation? Their thoughts aimed at the welfare of all of both the so-called upper caste and oppressed lower caste, yet true social change did not acquire. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Can I have another question?
May I audible, sir?
Yeah, you are audible, Kiran.
First of all, sir, congratulations, sir. Your lecture is very wonderful and excellent. I am Dr. Kiran Kumre. I am an assistant professor in Dalit and Tribal Studies from MPHV, Varda Central University.
You are in Varda? I
Yeah.
used to come to Varda for some lectures.
Okay, sir. Okay, come.
Okay.
I would like to ask you two questions. My first question is, what is the difference between Dalit philosophy and traditional Indian philosophy? And second question is, what challenges does Dalit philosophy face in modern India? As an academician, what would you like to say about this? That is my two questions. Thank you, sir.
Kiran, can you repeat the second one?
What challenges does Dalit philosophy face in modern India? As an academician, what would you like to say about this?
Thank you, Kiran.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, the third question is from my side. I just want
Yes,
to
Akash.
ask about you talked about the morality and the ethics, and when I see that these two terms, morality and the ethics, and try to put it in the frame of the caste, I see there it shows that the community which prefer to morality and ethics, it get difference when a dominant community participate in morality and ethics. It's different for Dalits and different for the other caste, and then different for their own caste. So these differences which we see in morality and ethics, so we don't have any commonality in the morality and ethics in the Indian society. So how we are going to deal such kind of things academically, and how we are going to frame this morality and ethics in the framework of philosophy and academia? That's my question. Thank you. Person, anyone else who are here who want to ask a question, please go ahead.
Hello. I
Yes,
want
sir.
to ask one question from Lucknow, sir. Namaskar, sir. Myself, Dr. Poonam Chaudhary from Khwaja Mainuddin Chishti Language University, Lucknow. I have one question on gender, sir, actually. I wanted to ask that if women was put it in Manusmriti equivalent to the Shudra, why we are talking about gender studies, but we are not talking about the Dalit and gender issues simultaneously equal to each other. Like when we talk about gender, we talk about upper caste problems, we talk about upper caste women and their views, we talk about and we celebrate about the upper caste women's success and each thing, and we show them that okay, women are below than that, women are below than this, but we don't differentiate it that a Dalit feminism, though it is there, this discourse is there in the society, but still we are not finding this equivalent. Like when we talk about Dalit, we only talk about the practices which are going on from ancient to modern right now. So why the women are not able to display herself and to define herself according to Manusmriti and according to the upper caste kind of discourses? Like I wanted to ask the differentiation between this Dalit and women issues, which is very much connected to the in the reference of Manusmriti. So,
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
think I am able to put my question, if you understand.
Thank you, Purna.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So anyone else who want to ask a question, please go ahead.
I think it's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will
Thank
start with the last question, then I'll come back to Professor Ajit. Dr. Purnam asked me what happened to the issue of integrating Dalit issues and gender issues, interrelating patriarchy with caste. Caste is, I used a particular terminology. I said caste colonial patriarchy continuity. Why I used it specifically, I used it so that you are all scholars, that you should be able to deliberate it in your own specific realm. So when I say caste colonial patriarchal continuity, which implies a sense of learning as well as holding hands with the tribal community, the Dalit women issues, and as a professor in language studies, and as well as a woman, the Dalit subjugation, and especially with reference to women, is interlocked, right? And there are layers of subjugation even among the non-Dalit women. I remember once I argued untouchability nativates. Nativates begins from the practice of keeping the women away during the periods time, menses time. And it is practiced in the dominant communities, not with the Dalit communities. So the origin, the birth, the childbirth of untouchability is not Dalit community. Is it clear? It is elsewhere, in elsewhere social practices. In other words, that's why I said in the beginning, Dalit exteriority is not exteriorized. The sense of being with is what we call Dalit existence. But the ontological precondition, the philosophical, documental, ontological, positioning, I call it categories of understanding. Is it clear? Are such a priori conditioned to perceive the Dalit as an excluded, as an exterior. But Dalit doesn't want to exclude himself or herself. His plea for affirmation of the world is his project for the liberation of the whole, not partial, in terms of connectivity, in terms of relationality. The child cries, mother feels it. So it's a sense of subjectivity, linguistically speaking, and moving towards an intersubjectivity. So the Dalit sense of discourse is not an antithetical discourse, immediately coming for a Sindabad. So I think it is a very cognitive, constructive discourse in terms of rethinking the established way of perceiving the world. Either subject-object relation or objectified relations or subordinate, whatever relation, I don't want to go back. So your question on Dalits, and I remember I came to Lucknow, there was an ICPR library. I conducted one seminar for 3 days. You know the title of the seminar? Years back. It was Dalit.
ICPR, it was there.
Yeah, I came and stayed in the ICPR building. I did a national seminar. That was years back. I titled the seminar Dalit Epistemology. Long back. And in relation to tribal epistemology. Years back we did that, but after the political change, the things did not take that kind of shape. I think it is, I use the word intersubjectivity. It is not subjectivity of me alone. Whereas in Indian philosophical tradition, subjective is understood as self-realization. The whole concept of liberation is totally away, outside what do you call, their boundary. Is it clear? Whether it is, better understand. The whole idea of liberation is misinterpreted, wrongly construed, without including the other. It's a kind of, Ambedkar would say, self-enclosed self. For Ambedkar, liberation is both needed. Not only the Dalit. Dalit need only the existence liberation. The non-Dalit needs both what he call liberation in terms of cognitive existence and liberation in terms of their mode of oppression. And Dalit discourse is a contest in that way. It's a discourse. It's a politics of knowledge against the geopolitics of Indian geopolitics of knowledge. In that way, I think it is more interrelated, intersubjective. It's not merely subjective. The second, Professor Akash was talking about morality and ethics. And you want a framework for it. See, caste system has a particular framework. And it is pronounced, documented, doctrinized, canonized in the language called Purusha Arthas. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And everything takes place in the body of Varna Ashrama Dharma. And there is a Kula Dharma, there is an Ashrama Dharma. Ultimately, there is no Dharma for Avarnas. You understand? That's why I said it is an institutional morality. A morality bound by a social institution, which a Dalit may not agree with. And there is no space. And there should not be a space. Is it clear? I call it instrumental rationality. Habermas will call it instrumental rationality. Such moral discourse is legitimized by a mode of repetition. How does caste comes? Does caste comes by saying and showing? Caste retains its power by repetitive regeneration. Is it clear? By repetitive cultural regeneration. So repetition is the mode of establishing truth. I think a Dalit may not agree. He needs certain testification. He needs a sense of understanding, a sense of becoming conscious of himself that he is being conscientized as Dalit. That's why I made the distinction identity from identification. We have a long way. We have a long way in the intellectual process of ascribing this sense of intersubjective relation. I think the framework is to be, first of all, nurtured from the protest relation, resistance relations. The framework must be not becoming conscious, I am a Dalit, I am liberative. I am conscious that I am conscious. I am collectively conscious with the women, with the black, with the racially inferior. We are collectively conscious and become what we call affirmative of the challenges. So it is not becoming conscious. It is challenging of the established consciousness is the framework. I think number of Ambedkar is the forerunner within Indian tradition. With the Western tradition, whole modernity is criticized by various thinkers. We call it post-structuralist. Is it clear? Linguistic, Purnam will be aware about linguistics of how words derive their meaning. And there is no centrality of meaningfulness. Right? There is no centrality. I refer to what do you call your linguistic thinkers. I will get back to you. Like words do not have a sense of physical meaning. Every meaning is a conceived meaning. So in that sense, the third area...
You are trying to refer Chomsky.
Start with Chomsky. Start with Chomsky and go ahead with Saussure, Chomsky, and Saussurean principle of relationality. Is it clear? And there is no specificity of understanding. The moon can be understood differently, the morning and the evening. And you have a German thinker who wrote a work on the logical foundation of mathematics. What's his name? Immediately I don't get. I come back to Dr.
Gottlob
Frege, exactly. Frege is very interesting for you. And especially linguistics have to develop from Frege. Gottlob Frege. Is it clear? Where he talks about what he call sensibilities. And there is nothing sanctum sanctorium about caste, even about Dalit. Right? There is nothing sanctum sanctorium about it. So that, I think we'll discuss later. And Dr. Kiran was talking about difference between the Dalit philosophy and the Indian philosophy. That's what Dr. Kiran I have been formulating, hypothetically, put it that way, are trying to discourse with. That Indian philosophy, by and large, dominantly, from its classical tradition until the contemporary world, even now this is what is going on. I've been part of many of the discussion in Delhi. Is it clear? By and large, from its classical till date, it remains intact by formulating its own categories of understanding of the real world. And that's why I said the non-existence of the Dalit is cognitively, misplaced, and rather not placed, silenced. That's a better word. The existence of Dalit, the reality of Dalit existence is so subtly tactically silenced that there is no discussion in Indian philosophy the question of the other. Say, for example, Vedanta, self and self-realization. Nyaya Vaisheshika, self. Is there any other self-realization, Nyayikas? Ultimately, it is individual moksha. There is no community. A sense of communitarianism is absent. And legitimizing the absence is the way of their success, both by cultural practices as well as cognitive conditions. Is it clear? And this has been traditionally reproduced. That's why I said they are following an epistemology of regression, going back, monolithic theory of understanding. Non-duality is affirmed by way of phenomenal world being negated. Neti advaitin. You are a philosophy professor. Is it clear? Now what to negate? Your body has to be negated. The phenomenal world has to be negated. If you negate, what will you understand? You make understanding devoid of any other understanding. What is left over? A post-colonial thinkers will call about it is sophistry. It is called what? Sophistry, self-ideation. There's a very bad word for that. I will not use it. Is it clear? Thinking on itself is sophistication. It is not action. Indian philosophy, what action I ask you one question, Kiran. In what sense Indian philosophy becomes social? What is the teaching they do in their social? In what I have been teaching Indian philosophy for 35 years, I have been teaching Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, 3, 4, and everything is rooted in a particular treatise, and everybody has its own duty. And duty, there is a difference in when Kant speaks about categorical imperative duty, he talks in the language of rationality as a foundation. That I am dutiful to you and you are dutiful to me by reason, not because your religion tells you. But unfortunately, Indian systems, Orthodox systems say Bhagavad Gita promotes categorical imperative. They are using Kant, misusing it. Immediately categorical imperative, duty for duty's sake. But duty for duty's sake within Bhagavad Gita, that you belong to a particular community and you should do that duty. Killing is justified. Violence is inbuilt. And Dalit is absentized. Is it clear? So Indian philosophy, by and large, I use the word incapable, which means We need to rethink the thinking categories. But it's very powerful to reproduce culture. Even Syedvada, relativism of Jainism, it's very close. But then it remains what is called relativistic. Relativism is not taking any standpoint. Dalit epistemology takes a standpoint. I call it a positioning epistemology. It's a positioning of itself towards the other, at the same time positioning of the critique of the dominant cognitive epistemologies. Positioning of the critique of the dominant epistemology. In that sense, Dalit does not go into relativism of epistemological position. Everything is fine. That is postmodern thinking. I still want to retain modernism of Ambedkar. Is it clear? Ambedkar was out and out within the paradigm of modernism, but then he came out of it. I used to say when discussion on Ambedkar is not completely modern. He transcends tradition and retains tradition. He establishes modernity in terms of secularism, rationalism, democracy, scientism, etc. At the same time, questions the question of what you call objectifying of the Dalit. So you find that kind of I don't say it is confusion. It's not a paradox. That is the way the Dalit has to. Me as a Dalit has all along been what I call discontent with, at the same time becoming content with certain habituation in my schooling, in my teaching, in my universities. Is it clear? So the discontent is the dialectical is the difficult position that the Dalit undergoes, paradoxically. Therefore, by and large, Indian philosophy incapable by its categorical a priori condition is incapable. And how do you capacitate it? Well, talk Dalit philosophy. Bring Dalit philosophy. Tell me any contemporary Indian philosopher discusses Dalit issue, starting from Radhakrishnan, Vivekananda, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, J. Krishnamurti. Tell me. A whole reproduced practical Vedanta comes in, right? It is another way of tactically politics of knowledge reproducing caste socially, existentially. Therefore, you need to have a discourse, not a dialogue. You can have a dialogue for attaining certain positions. Is it clear? But sense of being a Dalit, which means being with the other, needs to confront the exteriority of the being produced by caste system. What are the challenges Dalit philosophy? There is no discussion at all in Indian philosophy about Dalit philosophy. If at all, if there is any discussion, they'll put a tag to you. Oh, he's a Dalit. That's why he's tagging. Another tag is that any Dalit professor is supposed to talk like this. He will always talk like this. Tagging is the way of what he call putting you away from the mainstream politics. Is it clear? So the Dalit philosophical discourse has to capture its linguistic power. The protest word, there is a word called protest from Ambedkar. Protest, not only the protest in terms of certain physical entities, a cognitive protest. And it is a long way to go. And we need personals, we need scholars, and we need also a kind of a system, a structure, where such kind of work must be what we call produced. Either we are too activist or we are too silent as Dalits. Is it clear? Activism is very important. Activism coupled like the discussion that happened in Western philosophy. Scholastic coherency epistemology was denied by modern philosophers. Here, tell me, where is the denial happening? They deny only the empirical world. Is it clear? One karma is transplaced with another karma. Ultimately, you are in the cycle of karma. What is that? Is it clear? And we memorize it, listen to it, reproduce it. What exactly I am producing in the society of that reproduction? I am reproducing tactically a caste system whose nature is reproductive by a mode of repetition, by a manana, tradition, and inviting the common people back to the tradition. So in other words, Dalit philosophy is, I'm not telling very new. It is always there, right? Starting from Buddha and shifting on to modern period, Ambedkar and your other Maharashtra leaders. And I know in Tamil Nadu, the politics is very strong in terms of secular, rational protest movement. politically even speaking. But philosophically, intellectually, academically, cognitively, a certain discussion has to take place all over the world. What Poonam was talking about, relating with the feminist, relating with tribal, relating with the Dalit world, with the layers of it. So the challenge of Dalit philosophy is that it is not treated as philosophy. My PhD thesis back in 90s was something like this: Ambedkar critique of Indian culture and religion, engaging Heidegger. Okay, I played a politics. Heidegger is a phenomenologist. Ambedkar is our thinker here. Is it clear? And one major comment that came from the Brahminical, I don't use the word Brahminical, came from the Brahminical intellectual. How do you say Ambedkar is a philosopher? Then I have to borrow Heidegger and tell being with, deprivation, epistemological thoroughness, and they have a bit terrified. They said yes, all that. So we need to have this discourse. But the sense of that I am a Dalit is always pushing me behind. The space, probably the space that what professor has created, and he has put it Dalit intellectual encyclopedia, knowledge. Is it clear? So it is a challenge both at the social, practical, and at the principal level. Coming back to Professor Amit regarding why there is no radical transformation. Why there is no radical? You are all transforming to the another world. How can there be transformation? You are thinking of liberation, mukti. Is it clear? How can be social transformation? Radical means transformation in the root. That is the meaning of radical. We don't have an idea. Radical means tomorrow we get a casteless society. Day after tomorrow we will enter into Sarvodaya. Is it clear? Like medievalism provided we will all go to face. That dream world. Is it clear? That projective cinematic doesn't happen, cannot happen, because it is a cognitive construction for a long period. And Indian society, our Indian philosophical community, for example, have not discussed the idea of what is sense of radical and what is the sense of transformation. That's why I made a reference, if you are very careful. I said we are discussing philosophy within philosophy, like two players playing chess with their own tactics of argumentation. Basically, an Advaita will play his game of chess, Advaita, and on another Vedantin, what do you call the allied Vedantin will play his Dvaita. So Advaita, Dvaita will come together. It's a game of chess. The rule is the same. Self-realization. Come out of the chess. Play the game. As game. I remember when I was a boy in the rural village, we used to play a game called moon spot. Take sand, river sand, during moonlight, put this river sand like points. The whole village students will come. All the school boys who sleep in the school. So we are we go beyond the boundaries. How to go beyond the boundaries? I said intersubjectivity. I said relationality. Even it is supported by linguistic possibilities. So in that way, I think radical transformation is within Indian culture. I'm not talking about social activist contribution. Our own academicians who contributed to Dalit literature. Basically, I'm talking about cognitive critique in philosophy. In philosophy is very much limited, if not encouraged. It's very much limited. And even philosophy professors who engage Dalit discourse, they immediately go for quotations and then Ambedkar said, therefore we should not do this. That methodology. Is it clear? Like the proof of what you claim is lies in the text. That is a fallacy. That's an epistemological fallacy. My truth claim, the proof lies in a text. No, it cannot happen. The text itself has to be proved. And that is why Ambedkar would say Vedic scripture needs its own legitimization in order to claim that it is true. Ambedkar is a prophetic insight, but we need to read him in that prophetic manner. If you put him in a segmented modernist terminology, I think we are missing Ambedkar in discourse. So in that way, I think the sense of being radical, Professor MX, I don't say lacking, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Kuhn talks about paradigm shift. Kuhn, or who is that person, professor? Remind me. Kuhn in Western thought.
Philosophy of science.
I think it's Kuhn, right? Talks about paradigm shift. Western philosophy has undergone a lot of paradigm shift. Is it clear? How that paradigm shift is happening? By pointing out the analogies of scientific theory, a new theory comes in. That you call it development. But for us, only growth. Growth within our own self-reproduce understanding. I would be a good Advaitin scholar if I reproduce Advaita systematically. And what is afresh about, radical about it? I will relate it with Dvaita. I will relate it with Sishta Advaita. That is Indian scholarship. I am not against it. But there is a intellectual insincerity. They are intellectually sincere, but intellectual insincerity towards an openness towards the other. I think a lot of discussion can take place in that. So that's one of the reasons. And caste is tremendous. It is almost, let me use the word, Foucault word. It is like a kind of a panopticon. Panopticon? Wherever you go, you are seeable. Wherever you go, you are seeable by your camera. Now my computer was off because no power. Immediately professor contact, mobile is there. So caste is something like all-seeing God. Is it clear? And it is that eyes are inherited both by the Dalit and the non-Dalit, irrespective of all our achievement. Is it clear? So in other words, it's a Darshana in Indian philosophy. Sorry for some of these words. Indian philosophy starts from a word called Darshana. What ultimately, second word is scripture. Is it clear? That is orally passed on and heard. What is orally passed on and what is heard? The caste world. So reproduction is the epistemological wheel of Indian philosophy. If you write an article, they will not publish it, my dear Kiran. Is it clear? So that is it. This is how I would like to engage it with you. Thank you for wonderful questions. You are great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So, Professor Karunyakara, sir, can we go for a vote of thanks?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir, for a wonderful lecture. I really thank Professor S. Lourdunathan, sir, for giving us a very important lecture, which he take us to dive in a philosophical stream of Dalit discourse, which is a very important branch we need to be explored as a Dalit and a historian and a social scientist who are working in this field. I really thank him for. I also thank Professor Leela Karunyakara, sir, for chairing today's session. And I also thank the coordinator of Karunyakara Institute of Dalit Knowledge, Dr. Sukeshni Thorat, Dr. Smita Bhagat, Dr. Darshana Meshram, Mr. Shreyat, Shashikant Sambodhi, and Mr. Kumbhare. And also I thank everyone, the participant who visited in today's lecture. And also I request those who missed anything in today's lecture, this lecture is going to be uploaded on YouTube. Please go and check our link. Also subscribe our channel, Dalit Worldview. Thank you very much. We are going to meet next Saturday with a new lecture. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Take care. Have a nice day.
Thank you all. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you once again, Professor Lourdunathan ji. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us.
It's an opportunity to meet all of you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Have a good day. Yeah.
Thank you.